This is Miss Anna, and today I want to talk about something that changes a man more completely than almost anything else that can happen to him. The moment he genuinely stops needing female validation to feel okay about who he is. Most people misunderstand what this actually means when it happens, so let me be precise about it first. A man who stops needing female validation has not stopped caring about women. He has not become cold or bitter or closed off to connection. What has actually happened is quieter and more significant than that. He has stopped outsourcing his sense of worth to whether a woman is currently pleased with him. For most men, that outsourcing starts early and runs deep, often without them ever noticing it was happening. Attention from women, approval from women, desire from women, all of it gets quietly wired into a man's sense of his own value, starting sometimes as far back as adolescence. Being chosen feels like being validated as a person. Being overlooked or criticized by a woman he wants can feel disproportionately devastating, not because the specific situation warrants it, but because some part of him has learned to read her response as a verdict on his worth as a man. A lot of men live their entire adult lives never questioning this wiring. They chase approval without realizing it is approval they are chasing. They adjust themselves, their opinions, their behavior, their entire presentation around what will be well received, and they call this being a good partner, when much of the time it is actually something closer to auditioning continuously for a role they already have. Something different happens when a man genuinely stops needing that validation. And it is worth being honest that this rarely happens through decision alone. It usually happens through some combination of time, disappointment, and the slow realization that chasing approval never actually produced the security he was looking for, because approval that has to be continuously re-earned was never security in the first place. Here is what actually changes in him. He stops adjusting himself in real time based on whether a woman in the room seems pleased. He states an opinion because it is his opinion, not because he has calculated whether it will land well. He is able to disagree without the specific anxious flooding that used to accompany disagreement. The fear that disagreement itself might cost him standing he cannot afford to lose. He becomes able to hear criticism as information rather than as an indictment of his fundamental worth, because his worth is no longer something he is asking her to confirm. This does not make him distant. In many cases, it makes him considerably more present, because a man who is not privately managing his own anxiety about being approved of has more actual attention available for the person in front of him. He is not performing connection to secure validation. He is simply connecting, because connecting no longer has a hidden transaction attached to it. Women often experience this shift in a man as confusing at first, sometimes even as a loss. The version of him that needed her approval was, in a strange way, easier to influence, easier to steer, more responsive to subtle displeasure because subtle displeasure used to work on him. The version of him that has stopped needing it does not move the same way. He is not unaffected by her feelings. A man worth being with still cares deeply what the people he loves feel. But he is no longer managed by the fear of her disapproval, and that is a very different thing than not caring. What tends to happen next is something a lot of women do not expect. Men who have done this work often become considerably more attractive to the women around them, not because indifference is appealing, but because a man whose sense of self is not up for negotiation reads as stable in a way that is rare and increasingly valued. He is not trying to win approval, which paradoxically often earns him more of it than he ever received while chasing it. But the deeper change is internal, and it is the one that matters most regardless of what it does to his romantic prospects. A man who no longer needs female validation to feel like enough has access to a kind of peace that the version of him chasing it never had. He can sit in a room where a woman is displeased with him and not experience that as a crisis. He can hear no and not experience it as a referendum on his value. He can be disagreed with, misunderstood, even disliked, and continue to function as a whole person because his sense of himself no longer lives inside her opinion of him. I want to be honest about the other side of this too, because it deserves care. This is not a story about men needing nothing from women or about emotional self-sufficiency as some kind of superior end state that makes connection unnecessary. Needing nothing from anyone is not maturity, it is isolation with better branding. The healthiest version of this shift is not a man who no longer wants love or partnership. It is a man who wants those things freely, rather than needing them to complete a sense of worth he should have been building on his own the entire time. The man who reaches this place is not harder to love. He is simply no longer available to be controlled by the withholding of love, which is a very different thing, and one that tends to make the love he does offer considerably more genuine, because it is finally being given rather than extracted through the threat of its absence. I want to hear from the men watching this. If you have gone through this shift, what was the moment you noticed you had actually stopped needing it, rather than just telling yourself you had? Tell me in the comments. And to the women watching, one honest question. Do you want the version of him who needs your approval to feel okay, or the version of him who chooses you freely because he no longer has to? Sit with that before you answer it. This is Miss Anna, and I will be back with more of what nobody else will say. Subscribe if you are ready to keep hearing it.